One of the toughest parts about building your own tabletop role-playing game is teaching other people how you intend them to run it. Because when you hand over your book to a new player, all they have are the words on the page. That has to communicate to them the intended mode of play. And when you've been running tabletop role-playing games for the amount of decades that I have, a lot of session prep and running a session is just second nature to you. I don't really think a lot about the process that I go through to prepare the action horror sessions for Tales from Elsewhere Clockworld. And in finalizing the manuscript of Tales from Elsewhere Clockworld, our first tabletop role-playing game, link down below to the Kickstarter campaign for that's fully funded and just looking for some stretch goals now, I've had to address that lack of concrete structure to my GMing style as I fill out the GM section of the rulebook. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you the SAVE method of preparation, the condensed way I prepare my action horror sessions. So the method I'm going to teach you today can be used in any tabletop role-playing game you happen to be running, as long as you're looking to create scenarios that have high tension, dynamism, violence, and action. So it could be Dungeons & Dragons, could be Tales from Elsewhere, could be Mothership, could be Delta Green. Pick your poison. As long as violent resolution is likely part of that structure, this sort of method will apply. The first letter in the acronym is S for stakes. This is going to be pretty familiar to most of you. Any good scenario, any good fight, is going to involve stakes beyond just the bodily health of the participants. So when I'm preparing a scenario, I think about what the players would want and what the threats would want and how they come into conflict. It's not just, well, they enter a gray box and the players see a group of zombies and the zombies want to eat the players and the players don't want to get eaten, so they fight. It needs to be something outside of the participants themselves that is at stake here. Something more substantive and often visceral to make sure the players feel like they really have skin in the game. So for the stakes, I write just a few bullet points of what the different forces in the scene will want and make sure I keep those top of mind. For example, in one of the scenarios I've run many times, the river crossing, the players are part of a wagon train that is crossing a river in order to head out into the ruination and settle a new town. They have various supplies and useful NPCs like doctors and mechanics and gunsmiths, and as they cross, the players are ambushed by bandits who want to steal the supplies. So, sure, the bandits are fighting the players, but they don't necessarily need to kill the players. The bandits just want the contents of the wagons. And if they give up the contents of the wagons to the bandits, well, then they have fewer supplies to survive out in the wilderness. So that extra context is a much stronger stake than just live or die. It makes the fight more interesting. So I'll just write, the bandits want the supplies, the players need the supplies. The next letter in the acronym is A for action, and that kind of sounds like it's an obvious one, but what action means here is what creates activity within the scene, what makes things dynamic and forces movement and requires interaction in the scene. What's the action set piece that you're playing with? You don't want to just line up the minis on a little grid and smash them together till one side falls over. You want the players to feel engaged throughout the fight, and having action pieces can really help that. For example, the whole scene could take place on a speeding train or on platforms dangling over a lava river. Just something to add spice and action to the scene will go a long way. For example, in the river crossing, the river itself is a hazard that the players must overcome. It starts off just a trickle, but when the bandits ambush and blow the dam that's upriver, it starts to become very strong and can push people downstream or even start to drown them. And because in this scene one of the wagons overturns and pins an NPC, the players will have to run and help that. But then the bandits pop out from various parts around the map, drawing attention to different places. There's a waterfall up on some rocks that bandits are hiding up on top of, so that the players may need to go up there and root them out. All of these things require the players to move around the scene or be moved by it, which creates action. And for prepping this step, I just write a couple little notes like, train goes fast, falling hurts, or the river is strong and will sweep people away, bandits pop up everywhere. Just something to remind myself of how I should keep this fight feeling action-packed. Next up is V for Visceral Details, one of my favorite letters in the acronym. When you're running a session, you are juggling a lot. You have so many plates spinning, from telling the story to doing the voices of NPCs, controlling all the threats, building the scenes, rendering all the visuals and sights and sounds and so forth that the players have to experience, and it can be easy to forget to give the vivid details where they're really needed. So in prepping Visceral Details, it's not about writing out long box text on the descriptions I'd like to use, but instead just noting when I'd like to focus in on something and maybe a few words to remind myself what to do. Because I want to make sure that those gruesome, gnarly moments stick out and become memorable to the players. One of the only ways to do that is to fill them with those visceral, gruesome details. So for the river crossing, I note that I want to make sure that the river that's contaminated with oiler blood and all sorts of detritus is described in a lot of detail, because it's supposed to be gross and a little disturbing that that's present in the scene. And I'll note that because there's blood oilers that pop up later in this scene, to make sure to describe the way they dismember their foes in excruciating detail, where the blade goes through meat and then bone and then meat again as the whirring rusty saw blade cleaves one of the limbs off. You know, something really gross like that. The key here is just to make sure that those moments are always top of mind for you as you're juggling everything you need to do as a GM, so you don't forget to really zoom in and give them the gross. Last and certainly not least is E for Escalations. This is a toolkit you can have on your belt for how you can make the fight change dramatically and really crank it to 11 on a moment's notice. If all of the participants and mechanics and issues in a scenario are defined in the first round, well then there's nothing to surprise the players later. They know who's there in the fight, and they know what they need to do, and it's just about executing it. And this gets very stagnant after a few rounds. I talk a lot about this in an earlier video on this channel about the 3-round rhythm that I'll link down below. It's a useful way to keep rhythm, and escalation is a vital part of that. Escalations are ways for the fight to grow harder and more complex as time goes on. Maybe more enemies show up or different enemies appear. Maybe something that was stable becomes unsteady and could topple down into a ravine below or down into the lava. Maybe a clock has begun, some sort of timer where there's a bomb or something's being dragged away, or just something to get the players snapped back to attention and redefine the objectives of the scene. And to prep this, it's just about writing a few notes on what you would bring out if you need to spice up the fight. For example, with the river crossing, if it's not turning out to be intense enough to begin with, I just had the note, blood oilers wash up. And that tells me that, okay, when the dam was blown up, maybe there were blood oilers trapped underneath, and they started merging and dismembering the bandits. Now the priorities have all shifted in the fight and become much more dangerous, with the bandits probably siding with the players for their mutual survival. And it's important to note that escalations aren't things that are scripted to happen necessarily. They're tools for you that you can use during a scene or adventure to amp it up when you need them. Avoid scripting too heavily. After round 2, the blood oilers appear. You want to stay responsive to the rhythm of the players, where they're feeling, how they're responding to the stimulus that's coming, and if they're growing bored. Because the enemy of dynamism is an over-preparedness. It's too much pre-written, too much box text, and sequences of events that are unalterable. And that's why having escalations not as pre-written events, but as options at your disposal can keep things flowing more naturally. And I've found that by always having escalations ready to go, the players start to understand that they don't always have the full picture on round 1 of any scene they're in. That paranoia is delicious. Don't let them feel comfortable when a fight begins, like they know everything that's going to happen. Keeping them on their toes keeps tension and interest high. And that's the SAVE method. It's a simple little acronym of preparation, but not necessarily of writing. It's not about having this all pre-written in a sequence of events that you follow the script of. It's preparing things to keep top of mind so you stay responsive as you run the game. Not reading down the adventure line, but adapting and challenging the players in ways they won't expect. And you can use this for pre-written adventures that are handed to you. You can take something out of D&D or Pathfinder and make notes yourself for the stakes, action, visceral details, and escalations you'd like to use. It's a prep method, not a writing method. That's a separate discipline entirely. But I've found that to make really exciting and intense sessions requires that malleability. And you can see some of my methodology at play in some of the live sessions that I've run on my YouTube channel. You can go to the live section of my channel and take a look at some sessions that I've run in Tales from Elsewhere Clockworld, and try to spot the parts that I'm using the save method on, as I think you'll find it's pretty obvious now that you know what to look for. Well, I hope you found that interesting, and let me know if you give this prep style a try. I've been using it unconsciously for many years now, and it was an interesting experiment to condense that into written form for presentation, as this and many other pieces of my GM experience for running these types of games are going into the final rulebook. Definitely consider checking out the Tales from Elsewhere Clockworld Kickstarter that we've linked down below. It already has over 500 backers on it. Just so many people interested in picking up this game. It's worth checking out. Lots of examples of play and further rules explanations are all on that page. Well, all right, folks, thank you so much for joining me. I will see you here next week on Tales from Elsewhere.